Hello, and welcome to this latest episode of the Energy Insiders podcast. My name is Giles Parkinson. I'm the editor-in-chief of Renew Economy and founder and editor still of the EV Focus The Driven. And joining me, as usual, is ITK principal David Leach. David, sans chien, or as the French say, without a dog. What's happened?
Sol Chien, I think is
Yeah, well, so
but I'm not very good at French. But you know Bunel's film. Have you seen that, Le Chien Andalou?
No.
Oh, you should. It's a Spanish film. It's funny with but it's absolutely well worth watching. Great director Louis Bunel. I don't know if you've seen any of his movies, but I suspect that our wonderful guest this week, Damien Nicks, probably doesn't want to be talking about Spanish movies.
He might surprise us, you know. You never know. You never know what a big energy company CEO does in their spare time. I mean, you know, we'll look forward to. We'll get back to you next week if we get any feedback from AGL and Damien Nicks.
Bunel's got a movie about that too, The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, but maybe that doesn't apply in this case.
Anyway, as David has revealed exclusively on this podcast, we do have an interview with Damien Nicks, the CEO of AGL, and it's very topical, seeing as how AGL and all the other gentailers have come out with their annual results. They're about to go to their annual general meeting season, which could be interesting, with some activist shareholders complaining about possibly the lack of efforts on decarbonisation and why that is so. So we decided to get Damien Nicks on and put those questions directly to him. And we're thankful he came on. And here we go. Damien Nicks from AGL. Damien Nicks, thanks for joining the Energy Insiders podcast.
Great to see you both, Giles and David. It's good to be here and looking forward to this morning, and it's looking forward to catching up again in the near term.
Look, indeed. Look, there is so much to talk about in the transition. Sort of, there's new technologies, there's battery, there's wind and solar, there's all the consumer energy resources, but there's also the future of your fossil fuel generators. You just released your updated climate plan. There's quite a few grumbles that it hasn't really changed from the 2022 version, which attracted a lot of opposition. The reality is that if Australia is to meet its renewable energy target, it will be powered roughly 80% by renewables by 2030. AGL, though, will be 80% coal still by 2030. That can't be a good look.
Yeah, look, so we've just released our climate transition action plan, and so far, you know, the feedback has been really constructive, really positive in terms of what we're doing. And just to sort of step us back 3 years, you recall back in 22, our CTAP was all about the closure of coal 10 years earlier. So since that time, it's now been about delivery of our strategy against that. And if I just sort of piece that through, we've committed and almost spent, if you like, almost $3 billion towards the delivery of that strategy over the last 3 years. And in the last year alone, we have taken FID and got construction underway of another 900 million of batteries. So what's really important is to build out the portfolio that our customers are ultimately going to need for the future. And that portfolio is going to be a breadth of portfolios. It's going to, as you mentioned, it's going to have both wind in it, it's going to have hydro, it's going to have batteries, peakers, a whole range of technologies. And we need to build out that right portfolio for the future of our customers. And on top of that, you know, when you think strategically what we're trying to do, we're also trying to ensure that our customers, through consumer energy resources, play a big part of that strategy as well. So there's two arms to our strategy. The first is transitioning our customers to a sustainable future, electrifying them over the next decade, but it's happening now and it's happening very fast. And the second part is rebuilding our generation portfolio. And I don't want to undersell just the sheer complexity and the transformation that's required across the energy industry to get this right, because both reliability and affordability for our customers is absolutely critical as we move our way through this. So it's about getting those three balances absolutely right on the way through. And, you know, as I said, it's been constructive feedback. Our CTAP has all been about what we've delivered today, but also bringing forward some of our targets. We've extended our 5 gigawatts to 6 gigawatts by 2030.
But that's not wind and solar, is it? That's just mostly battery storage, that extra one, and you haven't really invested in new wind and solar in the climate action plan. It's got this nice little graph there. There was the Ryan, is it Ryan's Corner?
Rye Park.
Rye Park.
Rye Park.
And Flyers Creek, Ryan Corner of Rye Park. Rye Park was not a big wind farm. That's the only one that you've actually contracted in the last couple of years.
It's not a small wind farm. It's 400 megawatts.
Oh, okay. I stand corrected. Okay, it's one wind farm in 3 years. Can't you do more better than that?
It's a great question. I mean, and I think, if you think about what's in our portfolio today, we've got about 2,000 megawatts of wind farm PPAs in the portfolio today, of which, as you say, there is the Rye Park one. We've got a number of other tilt PPAs in the portfolio, and we're continuing to push as hard as we can to get more into the system. I think what the constraint is right now is both that planning and connection piece. It's still taking far too long bringing wind into the system. And that's why it's been a big advocacy point of ours. How do we actually improve the planning process, the connection process, so we can bring them in?
So if you could get them in more quickly, would you be able to close your coal-fired power stations more quickly?
Well, at the end of the day, we need sufficient energy and capacity. And what I would say to that is, when you think about how you run those coal-fired power stations into the future, it's like what we did with Liddell. You'll see us start to mothballing units. You'll see us running them very, very differently. It's going to be about reliability for the system going forward. So that's all part of our CTAP when you look at it. Our CTAP is all about getting this balance right. So we have enough energy and we have enough capacity. And the reason why we focused on batteries this time around our results is because that's what's right in front of us right now, because we're taking FIDs on those things. It doesn't mean wind and those other renewable resources aren't also important.
And Damien, just before, I don't want to wrap up. I'll have my own questions later, but you did mention in the comments post the investor conference about another 900 megawatts of batteries that you're looking to progress in the next 18 months. You're confident about. What can you say about that?
Yeah, look, again, I think it goes back to our confidence of delivery, bring them to market, really quickly. We've got another 900 megawatts. We believe we can bring that to FID over the next 12 to 18 months. There's 500 megawatts for our battery in Queensland and roughly another 500 megawatts of smaller batteries in New South Wales. For us, it's about getting them at the right in the right locations, the right economics, and getting them stood up. But we're really confident in doing that. And that was one of the big reasons. This year we also acquired Firm Power. They had some great locations, some great sites. So again, it brings them into the market as quickly as we can, and ultimately then supports more renewables coming into the market. The more renewables coming into the market, the more batteries we're going to have to build and other firming assets. But it's very important for us with the market to demonstrate that these batteries are going to play a big role also in our profitability over the coming years as we bring the other assets in. But I don't want to sit here and say it's just all about batteries, because our development pipeline sits at around about 9.6 gigawatts now. It is huge, right? Now, we all know that not every one of those megawatts will come online. Some will come, some will go. But it's about bringing in what we can to the market as quickly as we can.
And that's, I guess, the big question, and this is my last one before handing over to David, is that batteries is great, fantastic, and obviously coming down in price. They're modular, they're easily deployable. But you, like the other big generators, Origin Energy and Energy Australia, who are investing in batteries or contracting batteries, you've all got big pipelines of wind and solar, but no active decision making. It can't be somebody else's fault, just sort of connections and other things. Why can't you accelerate that and roll that out?
Oh, look, I think, we are pushing as hard as we can in those spaces as well. It's just taking longer to get them through the process, So, when you think about a wind farm taking, 5-7 years, what you therefore need to do through your development pipeline is keep pushing them through that pipeline so that when they are ready, you've got all the necessary approvals, you've got the transmission and so forth where you need it to be, then you take FID. It's not about sitting here today saying we're doing nothing. A huge amount of work is going on behind the scenes. And if I just name a couple, you've got the Pottinger wind farm out there, which it's got, the access rights into the Southwest Res. We've got one down in Barn Hill. There's another one in Victoria, just to name a couple. They are continually moving along in the pipeline. And then if you then go further out in the horizon, we've got 2 pumped hydros as well. that's even a longer burn, but you just need to make sure you're continuing push them through so that when you're ready to take FID, you can do it and you've got the right economics behind it. So it's not one or the other. The market is going to need all of these things. It absolutely will.
Damien, I was going to actually suggest that we switch the roles around and you could be, I don't know, like Rob Coe from Morgan Stanley, and I could be, a value investor asking you a few questions. But then I figured that the legal and everyone's team wouldn't like us going off reservation like that. So I'll just stay conventional. I guess when I look at it, you've got something like 30 terawatt hours coming from Loy Yang and Bayswater, which are due to close within 10 years. And I think, roughly they earn, in an EBITDA sense, let's say 1.2 billion. I mean, that might be wrong by 10 or 20%. And then you put in $400 or $500 million of capex in each year, which must have a very fast depreciation given the 10-year lifespan. So, you put like $3, $4, $5 billion of capex into these assets that are going to be closed within 10 years. But I think my real point is that how are you confident you're going to be able to replace that $1.2 billion of EBITDA, that 800 or 900 million of net operational cash flow, with other stuff to represent a decent proposition for investors?
Yeah, look, that's almost exactly the type of questions I was getting from the analysts on day one, which was very deliberate from our perspective as well, to point out that just alone of the batteries we've taken FID on, they will more than offset the impact of what we're calling the cost, the gas and coal recontracting in 2028. And if you look at the chart, I think if memory serves me right, it was about slide 32. We spent a lot of time talking about that to the analysts.
Sorry, Damien, just for our audience, not everyone understands about the gas and coal contracting in 2028. Could you just explain what you mean there?
Yeah, sure. So if we think about what the investors have been asking us over the last number of years, a lot of our major both gas and coal contracts come up for recontracting very, very deliberately at that point in time. So we need to recontract those. The gas and coal, when we hit those points in times, will be more expensive than what we've previously contracted. So the market is sitting there saying to us, show us, to your original question, show us how you're going to not only replace earnings, but grow earnings. So what we're able to show through the results is just the batteries alone, right? So just those, the Liddell battery, the Tomago battery, the Torrens Island battery will more than offset that impact. And that impact's circa, less than 250 to 300 million. That is before we take any more FIDs on the 900 megawatts of batteries, future renewables and so forth in the portfolio. So it gets to that earlier question, can we replace earnings? Absolutely, we're going to be able to replace earnings over time by building out our portfolio. That's exactly why we're doing it. At the same time, we want to also work with our customer and orchestrate the customer using the assets in the home to also help generate value for both the customer and also in the market as well, so that we can help share that value.
And so just on those contracts, the obvious one is the Tomago contract. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily, that's going to go away. I mean, do you plan to actually replace that in terms of volumes, or just let that volume slide? And I guess the same sort of thing would go to a lesser extent to the Portland smelter as well.
Yeah, look, the smelter, the Portland and the Tomago smelters are clearly big, important customers in the marketplace today. The Tomago contract is finishing up in 28, as is the coal contract. So having those two aligned is incredibly important as we think commercially about how you recontract coal, how you run the power stations. That's a very important part of that. We continue to be in discussions, as you'd expect, with Tomago. On the Alcoa side of the equation, Alcoa's got a contract out to 2035 when Loy Yang will exit the market. Importantly, as part of that contract, we actually have the ability to start feeding renewables into that contract as well. So that's also an important angle as part of that contract.
Great. And then also you mentioned that in the report that coal and gas costs. I mean, I just spend a little time talking about gas. Did I read correctly that your actual cost of gas was $8 a gigajoule?
I'm not sure where you've read that necessarily. I think you might have been picking up, we have some very low cost gas contracts, dating back 10, 15 years ago. And again, that's been a big focus of the market. Some of that gas goes all the way up north and out through the GLNG as well. However, then a fair portion of that also goes to our customer base, in terms of both the residential customers and also C&I. We'll continue to need to contract gas for our customers. We need to work with them as they electrify. And if you think about the affordability cost of living right now, not all customers can electrify their home all at once. So we're working with them really closely, providing tools like Electrify Now, so that they've got tools that as they want to electrify their home, they've got tools to be able to do that. And we're really seeing particularly big step up in gas, hot water to electric, even the stove in the home. We're seeing real signs of it happening, and including, obviously EVs making the penetration it is as well.
That's right. And so households are obviously making a lot more of their own electricity these days with rooftop solar, and they're going to be exporting less because of this terrific uptake in household batteries. I'm just wondering what that means. I mean, you've got, like every big gentailer, various strategies around VPPs and electric car charging and so on. But the essential historic bread and butter business of customers buying electricity from you, I mean, that volume's be lucky if it grows at all. Would you think?
Yeah, look, it's really interesting what we're seeing in the marketplace. This was the first year, I think, in something like 8 years that we've seen underlying demand growth in electricity in the marketplace. So, the efficiencies that have been coming through are now, I think, starting to be offset by electrification of the home, electrical industrial in the industrial space, but also importantly EVs as well and data centers. So we're starting to see that growth happen. What you're saying is right in terms of the home, but it's going to be a very, very different customer of the future. That customer of the future is going to need to be fully connected. It's about how we shift load, how we orchestrate load. And if it is just in the home, therefore, I think the whole market won't get the necessary benefit. Whereas if we can orchestrate that load and we can share that value with the customer, there's more value for the customer, but there's also a better outcome for the overarching grid as well. So I think that technology is going to play such a critical role in this space going forward, and that's why we've invested in Kaluza. We're going through the transformation. We are at the customer side. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to now all do, and I think this is the right way to think about it, we're trying to shift the load and move the load so that we can sort of balance it out over time. At the middle of the day right now, we know there's a big duck curve. How do we start shifting that around? And one thing that was fascinating that we've seen in the last number of months is we're offering what we call free for three in the middle of the day in South Australia. We've actually seen customers shifting load into the middle of the day. That's a really good thing for the system, right? So as we think about load, we have to think about the whole portfolio we manage. We manage risk effectively on behalf of customers. And that's what we're endeavoring to do, to get that load shifting to where we need it to be so that, again, we're not getting these big peaks and troughs through the day.
But according to the Nielsen review, you don't want to manage risk on behalf of your customers. But anyway, I'm not going to go there. I do want to come back to the 30 terawatt hours of generation that you own, operate, and dispatch at the moment, because batteries, of course, are net load consumers. And so, do you actually plan to contract 30 terawatt hours, or I mean, if I look out to 2035, will you be a smaller dispatcher of energy, or will you still have 30 terawatt hours of energy? And if so, where are you going to get it from? Is it going to be, stuff you own yourself or stuff you contract via PPAs? Where's the actual energy coming from?
Yeah, so it's going to be a combination. It's going to be a combination. If I answer the last part of that question, it's going to be a combination of us owning some assets, contracting a lot of the assets. And we've always said strategically, we see ourselves putting roughly 20% of renewables on our balance sheet, 80% off, right? And I'll explain the reason for that. Obviously, that lower cost of capital of other players in the market. But then importantly, we will contract that energy so that we have sufficient energy. And if you think state by state today we're long in Victoria, we're marginally short in New South Wales, we're short in Queensland. At the end of the day, we need to work out what is the right profile for our customer load. So when we've thought about the 12 gigawatts of 6 of energy and 6 of capacity, It's all about where we see the customer demand of the future going. We'll obviously therefore continue to build out our development pipeline. As that demand changes, we'll obviously shift and move our development pipeline to meet the needs of our customers. So we're not sitting there today saying we will build replacement for replacement. It's about what our customers are going to need for the future.
And can I ask about the cost of capital? Because it's a very old argument I've heard. I mean, if I look at, AGL, it's got what? I can't remember, $15 billion of assets and about like $12 billion of net assets, net of debt. But the market capitalization's, I don't know, what is it, $5.5 billion, easily the smallest of any of the utilities. Like Origin's $20 billion, APA's, what is it, $11 billion, Santos is $20 billion. I mean, your price to NTA, if I was to look at that, is very low. And it just makes me think about what your actual cost of capital really is, because Grant King used to sneer at the returns on wind projects, but then he'd go and dump, $1 billion in some gas reserve that never made any money, or a pumped hydro project in New Guinea that, was never going to fly. It might have had a return on capital of 100%. In fact, it turned out to be zero or negative. So, I mean, what's wrong with the cost of capital in wind and solar? Isn't it perfectly satisfactory for a utility? You guys are meant to be low cost of capital infrastructure style businesses.
Yeah, well, my point being, there are others out there with lower cost of capital than us that can deploy that into the market and get that sort of flat revenue stream from renewables when they PPA to us. We then package up that energy, if you like, and then selling it into the marketplace. We could not today build everything. Like, you think about all the firming that needs to be built and all the renewables that need to be built for our portfolio, we simply just do not have the capital to be able to do that. So it's about demonstrating, saying, where do we think we can best portfolio and package up the assets that we have so we can deploy it back to our customers. And that's why what's said, firming assets largely on our balance sheet, and renewables off our balance sheet, but that's not saying there'll be none on either side. That we will have some on our balance sheet.
Yes, Damien, and I hear that argument. I've heard it many times, but I kind of think also of the marketing side of things and the image and the brand image and what you actually stand for in all of that. And can you just, why would someone choose AGL? It's not necessarily going to be any cheaper than anything else. It's reliable, I guess. But let's talk a little bit about Tilt, which you've been a 20% investor in, and I understand you probably have first right of refusal over at least some of their new projects. How are you thinking about that investment going forward?
Yeah, look, Tilt's been, you recall we set up that vehicle some time ago through both, the Silverton and the Cooper's Gap wind farms. It was important to get that construct together. And for us, we want to see Tilt continue to deliver their development pipeline, get assets into the marketplace so that we can ultimately look to partner with them and look to how we offtake some of that energy. That's really important. What we've said through the results, again, is, really clearly, is when we think about the capital that we have in front of us, for us, what's important is getting the energy, getting the offtakes, right? So that's the role we see Tilt playing for us. But that's why we'll continue to even partner with other people like Samiva and so forth, because there are plenty of players out there. They are looking for partners like us to offtake the energy. That's the important piece of the puzzle that these people are looking for, so they can get their capital, so they can get their funding, and so they can get their assets stood up. And so it won't be one partner or the other. It will be a number, and that's exactly how we've operated this business for a period of time. And I think back to your earlier question, what is it that customers see in us? Today we have about 4.5 million customers. We still have a number of customers that are traditional elec and gas, but what is really building very quickly is the fact of how do we use technology to bring further value to these customers. And so at home, it's going to have a solar, battery, EV, hot water and so forth. That is where the value of the future customer will come from for the customer point of view, but also from an AGL point of view. Technology has to be at the center of everything that we do in this space. You'll no longer be able to operate the same sort of business as we do, 5 years ago or today in 10 years' time.
Personally, I think it's all about brand value myself and brand equity. And for that, I think myself, you have to actually have something that your future customers can really believe in, whatever that is. But and I mean, you talk about Pottinger. I mean, I guess your balance sheet might be constrained, but it's not as constrained as their balance sheet. Are you probably going to go through the model of developing this up? And I mean, what you offer all of these projects is a PPA, isn't it? Really, I mean, that's the most. Once you've got a PPA and maybe a CIS contract, you can wander off to the bank and someone else will loan it. That's the essential point, isn't it? Really.
It is. I mean, what all of these projects need, these, they need someone who's going to, write the PPA, the offtake. So exactly right. So they can go to the bank, get the funding, get it built, and then they know they've got that offtake on the other side. That's absolutely critical in this market. When you think about a Pottinger, it will be what partners do we bring in? How do we bring capital to the market to support that project? It's going to be a huge project. I think it's 1.3 gigawatts. I think from memory. No, sorry, it's not 1.3.
About 800 and something megawatts.
So it was, yes, 878. So I had that wrong. You're right. About 878 megawatts, plus a 500 meg battery as well. So it's an exciting project, and I think we've got really great community support around the project as well. So that's also a really important piece right now in getting these projects up. And so therefore, how do we get it stood up as quickly as we can? So therefore, we can bring it to market, we can get to FID, and then we can make sure we've got the right capital to support it.
So I talked to Anthony Fowler about when Liverpool Range might get to FID. When do you think Pottinger might actually get to FID? I mean, it must be in your budget somewhere.
Yeah, look, we would hope that project gets to FID sometime in 26. So it's not that far away when you look at it like that. But again, you've still got lots of different planning processes. We've got the IPC planning approval through. We've also got the Southwest Res access right. So they are big points of, if you like, decision making as you work through these projects. It's now about, making sure we can bring it to a financial close at the right time.
Yeah, and I'll hand back to Giles in just a second. But I mean, there's a number of other big projects that are looking for PPAs at the moment, either ones that won something in the CIS like Valley of the Winds, or just other big projects that are out there. Are you seeing that it's like a lot of it's a seller's market, it's a buyer's market in a sense? You've been offered lots and lots of PPAs, and you can just kind of pick and choose which ones you want, but no great rush?
Oh, no, not at all. I wouldn't quite put it like that. What I would say is, as a large player in this market, we'll always get those type of players coming to us with, PPA type offers into the marketplace. Again, when we think about what our portfolio needs, it's where we need the energy, what location they're in this case, when the wind's blowing, and therefore how do we tie that all into our portfolio? So we will get offers all the time, and we're therefore having a look at that from an economic perspective and a portfolio perspective. At the end of the day, we want to bring the cheapest energy we can into the marketplace, because that ultimately goes through to what the customer pays. What I would say is, over the last number of years, we've seen the cost of wind go up. All right, so wind has gone up in the marketplace over the last couple of years. Solar stayed broadly flat, and we've seen battery fall.
So, sorry to interrupt, but what I would say is you should have signed a whole lot of bloody PPAs 3 years ago, as should everyone else, and then we wouldn't be having this problem. But anyway, go on.
I could go back a lot further in history as well on that one, but it's always about trying to make the right decision at the right time for the market, right? So you're always trying to balance that. And right now, just my point on batteries, to see that the Tomago battery was half the cost of the Liddell battery, as an example. I mean, that was quite staggering to see that, and that comes from both price of lithium, which, I think we all understand, but I also think it's the technology, and how much, if you like, the denseness or the density that we can get into these batteries, because, we had Liddell about 1,500 cubes. And I think we talked about this, and Tomago is now at about, let's call it 400 cubes, but the density per container is quite astounding how much you're seeing that technology evolve. So again, we want to see how, whether it's a battery or whether it's a wind farm, how we continue to sort of drive down some of those costs as well, because I think the technology cost of a battery's come down. The cost of installing the battery, the EPC, has gone up, if anything else, and the cost of wind EPC has certainly gone up as well.
So I just think that some wind developer that progressed wind projects steadily, getting one started every year, would soon get down on their own learning curve in Australian conditions, but just no one actually gets on and does it. But over to you, Giles.
It was interesting. I was at a battery asset management conference in Sydney yesterday, and we're actually mentioning Liddell and Tomago. No one actually believed that the costs had come down by half. Can you reassure us that that's the case?
I could certainly reassure you that's the case. We took FID. What was it, back in July on Tomago? It was quite incredible to see where that had moved to. And I get asked a lot of questions out on the road over the last week with investors about, do we see batteries falling at that same rate any further? And my response would be, not at that same level. It was a lot driven by lithium, and in fact, lithium's probably come up a little bit since that time. But I do think there's technology improvements still to come. I mean, we're all talking about lithium batteries here. I think there'll be new batteries coming to the market in time as well. But what I really liked about this is, you think about us doing 1,500 cubes down to let's call it 400 cubes. It means the number of, the amount of concrete, connections, and labor all starts to come down, right? So there is efficiency there. And then when you're thinking about managing it, you're managing 400 cubes, not 1,500 cubes, right? And the other really exciting thing...
When you say cubes, Damien, sorry, do you mean containers?
Containers, yes, I do mean containers. Yeah, containers. Yep, dead right. I call it a cube, but yeah, it is a container.
It's not a very good look for the gas industry, though, because that site at Tomago was supposed to be a gas-fired generator. You got approval for that a long, long time ago, but now you've gone ahead with battery storage. So we hear that we need more firm capacity, both batteries and gas, but it's going to be very hard to get any gas projects over the line.
Yeah, look, you're right. That was a site that we had earmarked for a gas peaker. We simply couldn't get the gas volume that we needed for that particular site. And to my earlier comments, I think the market is going to need all of these things we talked about. Like we have today, we have a whole range of technologies that play different roles. So, I do think that there is absolutely a role for gas peakers, like we have in South Australia. A state that's 70, 80, times 100%. We've still got a peaker there that plays its role when it needs to. It might only operate 5 or 10% of the time, right? But when it's needed, it's incredibly important for that need.
Just on Torrens B in South Australia, you've been asked to keep it open for another 2 years, and I think you've indicated that you're broadly in agreement with it. But obviously there's negotiations to come. What do you need to happen to come to some deal? Do you need the government to help pay for maintenance for the extra 2 years?
Yeah, look, so that plant was planned to be closed in June 26. We're currently in discussions with them, so I can't go into conversations on this podcast right now, but where that's at.
They listen to this one.
No, but look, importantly on that particular plant, if you like, it's a very old power station. I think some of the units are 46, 47 years old. One's almost 49. It is at the end of its life, right? So the work we need to do was to ensure that we can run it, for a couple more years for the reliability purposes for that state. And just to give you a bit of background, we have 3 units there. One's already we have 4 units in total. One's already mothballed. We've got 3 that run intermittently, and they run about 15% of the time. And we typically would run 1 to 2 units at any point in time, just purely for reliability purposes for the state. So, for us, it's we've got a great site there. Torrens Island is a great sort of example of, I think, the transition, in action. We've got a battery there, we've got a peaker there. We're demolishing an old power station, and we're looking to build out the hubs as well.
And Barker Island's reciprocating engine versus the gas steam turbine of Torrens Island. How have you been pleased? I mean, it's the only big reciprocating engine gas station in Australia, Barker's Inlet. How's its performance been according?
Yeah, look, it's done exactly what we'd planned it to do when we took FID on that. Well, it must be now 4 or 5 years ago. I think it's been in operation, I think 3 now maybe. But again, we fire it up in 5 minutes. It's on and off in 5 minutes. It does exactly what we need to. We can fire it up out of Melbourne too. So from an operations perspective, when you think about batteries and peakers and different assets, the way we operate our portfolio also changes enormously, right? So that's an example there. We've got a small peaker over in WA as well, which we're looking to expand that one as well for the WA state. But importantly, it's all about having portfolio of assets, right? And the other longer term I talked about was the pumped hydro. We've got 2 pumped hydros. We acquired the Upper Hunter this year as well. We're also continuing to progress Musselbrook. These are all the things I think are going to be needed in the marketplace, but we need to make sure the right market mechanisms are there, particularly for these long duration storage assets, or those long duration sort of firming assets such as peakers. That's what part of the work that the Nelson Review is doing, to make sure there's the right market mechanisms to support the right market assets for the future.
Yeah. I'd like to come back to the Nelson Review in the next question, but first of all, I just want to sort of pick up what you said about battery technologies and moving on. You talked about lithium being the battery technology of choice now. You sort of hinted that there's others that you're interested in. Can you sort of discuss those at all? What's attracting you? Because you guys have been looking. Well, you guys actually been looking at a bunch of different technologies. There's the solar thermal, the Raygen stuff. You've got SunDrive possibly moving to Liddell, I think. Let's have maybe just a quick chat about those new technologies. So maybe start off with some of the prospective battery ones.
Yeah, look, so when I think about the battery technologies, obviously lithium today is the most economic, the most viable for the market. There's sodium batteries out there. There's some nickel hydrogen batteries out there. There's a couple of batteries like that we've also been trialing as well, which is, I think, incredibly important. This market will continue to evolve, and AGL we're not a developer of technology. We are a user of the technology, so we're always looking for what is the right and the best technology. So I think it will continue to evolve. Solid state might get there in time, but the economics of all those batteries I've just talked about don't stack up right now against a lithium-ion battery, but in time they might. The other interesting tech that I think you mentioned, which we're an investor in, one is Raygen. So that's a really interesting technology, which really what it does, it's solar plants focusing sunlight into if you like, receivers, and then solar thermal is what it's doing. It's some really interesting tech that might get there in time for this long duration storage and energy needs. I think that's a really interesting one. We continue to invest in that space. The other one you mentioned, what was SunDrive? So SunDrive is an advanced manufacturer of solar panels. We're looking at a number of players like that for what we call our industrial energy hubs. So when Liddell Power Station is now closed, we're knocking that thing down. We want to then see how we bring back industry into the regions, and importantly, having something like a SunDrive there, a new farm. I'm just trying to think of some of the other MOUs we've got out there as well. Renewable Metals and Alexum. These are the sort of businesses which were signed what we call MOUs with, so very early stage. But if we can get that sort of circular economy onto the site with a battery there, I think it would be a really great position for the local economy. But also when you think about the energy transition, that's what we're endeavouring to do. That is our strategy about industrial hubs. It is hard work, let me say. It's hard work. We continue to need to work with government closely to bring together all the various parties, and how do we coordinate that to get these businesses up and running? That's probably the challenge right now.
And you mentioned pumped hydro. These are difficult assets to get across the line. So what are you looking in terms of sort of getting help there? I mean, the Energy Security Corp from New South Wales has been created, obviously with that sort of thing in mind. You've mentioned the Nelson Review. They're not sort of tipping the baby out with the bathwater. They're sort of keeping things going, but want to make some tweaks to sort of address the issues like tenor and things like that. And then there's also the issue of market power, which we've sort of discussed on this podcast several times. And you're one of those people with market dominance. How should we think about that?
Yeah, so if I just pick apart that question a little bit, it's a few in that, but that's all right.
It was 3 questions in one, actually.
No, you're good at doing that. So,
not too sure it's a good thing, but anyway.
So if you think about, let's start with pumped hydro. You're right. The economics of pumped hydro are hard to get them to stack up right now, right? Because it's big cost to get them built. It's long planning times. But we've been really pleased with the way the Musselbrook and the support we've got from the Musselbrook pumped hydro through New South Wales government. That has been really positive. So we're continuing to progress that. There's mechanisms like the LTESA in New South Wales that a vehicle like that would bid into. The interesting thing about these assets is these are 100-year assets. You build a pumped hydro, 100-year asset, and so you've just got to get your head around the economics of the return on an asset over 100 years and the role it can play. I do think there is a role for them to play. It's just about getting the economics to stack up. We'll continue to progress both of them.
But you, as a CFO, before you were CEO, would know better than me that the NPV of an asset over 30 years doesn't really change very much, does it?
No, it doesn't. But I think the key point is the capital costs, the build of these assets up front. That is the one that you've got to stare into. Where do you think this market is going to go over that next 20 or 30 years? That is always the hardest decision you make with any of these type of assets. They are long-term assets. You're making an investment decision over a long period of time. So, for me, we'll keep progressing those. We'll keep pushing them along. We'll get them through the various stages, and then we'll make the decision from an economics point of view. But again, I do think this market does need that post 8-hour type assets in the marketplace to respond.
And the Nielsen review, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I sort of touched on that earlier. I mean, I think what's been really positive about that review has been the engagement across the marketplace, because I think the last thing we need right now in the market is a lot more policy disruption. We're all here trying to invest billions of dollars and get these assets in the market, get them stood up as quickly as possible. So I think the engagement's been great. There is a lot of detail still to come, though. And I wouldn't sit here today and say, do I love every single part of it? And the team know that. But what's important is it's going to be a package of measures. What is going to be the right package of measures for this market between now and the next 10 to 20 years? That's ultimately what I'm looking to see. And I think some of the points you raised through this podcast is one, the tenor question. That is a question out there. How will that work? What's the mechanism? Who will run that? And so we don't have the answers to that yet. The other one is the retailer obligation mechanism. Again, that's been one for us and the market that we need to see how that is going to work as well. But look, broadly, I think there's some really positive things in there. But I think the biggest positive for this market will be get some stability in policy so we can all get on and get the assets built we need to build.
I think the biggest positive for the market would be getting some wind farms with PPAs myself, some big wind farms. I can think of nothing that would give them any more confidence than that. But
well, maybe let me say, let's watch this space. Let's watch this space for a little bit.
I like the sound of that. My final question, Damien, is it's kind of like getting back to the naive value fund manager thing. I mean, the AGL share price has declined from about $15 to about $8. I mean, it went up as higher than 15. It was $25 at one stage a few years ago. The price to asset backing ratio is terrible. You've got a decline in net present value asset in your coal generation. I'm a value investor or a growth investor. Why should I be looking at AGL?
Look, I think the key here is for us is the delivery of this multi-decade strategy. And we these results themselves, we're really clear about how do we see that value being created from the deployment of these new assets. And I think that's landed. That has landed well. I think the challenge we have in the marketplace is short-term investors versus long-term investors, and about getting the right investors there to get behind this transition, because we need all stakeholders behind this transition. It is not just one or the other. And for us, that is what we need to see. At the moment, you're right. We're an organisation that has a huge amount of coal still in our business. It is going to be, closed over the next 10 years. So we need to have built out those assets around our business, continue to build out those products and services for our customers, which, we have the strongest brand in the market today. So how do we continue to leverage that? How do we continue to leverage, value for our customers? That's what this is all about. This was never going to be an easy transition. I don't think any of us sitting around on this podcast together would say this was ever going to be easy. It's a complex transition. We need all parties involved. We need all stakeholders getting behind. This is the direction we're going. This is where we're seeing the delivery. This is where we're seeing the ambition. Let's get after this and let's get it done.
I think it's the ambition and the commitment to the ambition myself, but thank you for that answer.
Yeah. And just, I've just got two very final quick questions. One is a similar one to David, but rather than the point of view of the value of the growth investor is from the customer. I've got rooftop solar, I've got an EV, I've got a home battery, or I don't have those things. Why choose AGL?
Yeah, look, so the why choose AGL is the way we if you like, we stitch together all those products and services. Not only do we have a great products and service today for our customers who just today have electricity and gas, but we're also providing those products and services for those customers that are moving their own way through the electrification products. And I think Electrify Now that we put out originally, we had over 500,000 hits to that website where people were looking for solutions, ideas, and how to go about doing that. They're the sort of things we'll keep doing. We'll also keep rolling it.
And how much take up?
Oh, look, if you think about the take up, if I think about the customers that have actually then gone in and moved on sort of their hot water system or their gas appliances, it has been quite large, right? But I think for me, it's actually been providing solutions for customers. This is hard for customers as well. This is not an easy task for someone to look at their house and go, how do I electrify it? When do I do it? And many customers, what we're seeing is they're choosing to do it when their appliance gets to the end of their life, as opposed to, doing it all at once because they simply can't afford it. So for me, it's about how do we provide, and this is not just us, the market, how we give them this information to make it as easy as possible when the time is right for them to do it. And then the other big piece, as I've talked about, is orchestration. How do we make sure we are sharing value with the customer? So you stitch it all together. If we're using some of their battery or they're moving solar onto the network and so forth, how do we share that value with them? Because ultimately, that's also going to help the grid. That's an important part of this.
And there's a whole conversation to be had about that, which we don't really have time for, which is unfortunate. But look, just one final question, and this just comes back to sort of, the identity and the sort of the value proposition, or just the whole proposition from AGL. Is there any possibility at all that one or even both of your remaining coal-fired power stations could close earlier than currently scheduled? Bayswater for 2033, Loy Yang for 2035. It could be some units close earlier rather than the whole power station. I'm guess, when we sort of listen to the climate science and we look at what's happening around the world and we talk about this need for transition, people are sort of looking for hope that somehow we can actually, do this quicker than currently on the table. What can you offer?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely great. I mean, that is the sort of question we're staring at every day. How do we make sure we've got the right assets in the market for our customers? And what I would say, and we're very deliberate through our climate transition action plan to talk about the type of things that we're looking at, particularly with those assets. And as I said, I think what you will see, a bit like with the Liddell closure, we close one unit a year out from its designated closure. So I think you're going to see mothballing. You're going to see us potentially do 2 shifting in time. Yeah, you're going to run the units very, very differently, and we'll continue to flex those units as well. Like today, just a quick example, we've spent money on the Bayswater power station, and quite a lot of it over a period of time. We can now flex that power station down to 80%, right? So 80% all the way down, and you see that through the middle of the day. We do that. Loy Yang to about 40%. We're going to try and get another 5% out of that if we can. That's also an important piece of this story. It allows more renewables into the market in the middle of the day, and therefore you've got those assets there at the back end of the day, whilst the rest of the market is being built out. So I think, it's going to be a more sophisticated approach to closure, as opposed to it just all closes on one day. It's going to be the asset management planning, the engineering, and how you think about bringing those assets out is critically important.
So by 2030, you won't be supplying your generation mix won't look 80% coal, because it can't be really in a world that has 80% renewables. So it'll be considerably less through this flexing and through these mothballing and the what do you call it, the two
shifting. We didn't get to 2 shifting, but that's effectively, overseas you see some markets, and we're doing the work on it. It's still early days, whereby they might, if give you an example, they might shut a power station on a Friday and bring it back up on a Monday morning, right? So the 2 shifting work that we're doing at the moment, we've taken the unit out, 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, brought it back in at 4 o'clock, right? Now, at this point, it's very early days, and we need to do a huge amount of work to make sure we're comfortable with those sort of mechanisms. But we're trialing it. They're the sort of things that we're doing in the marketplace, testing how we run our assets. They've been engineered to do that. It's now about how do we actually give ourselves the comfort that they're in the market when you need them to be, particularly if you have any peak times.
I think the industry's done very well and been able to reduce the coal generation output across the whole industry in the middle of the day. I think it's industry's done very well on the flexibility. But Damien, I thank you for your time that you've given us to answer all these questions. I think it's a tough job you have. and I wish you all the best.
Well, thank you both for your time this morning. It's been a good discussion. Always good to chat, and looking forward to catching up in the near term.
That was Damien Nicks from AGL, well, the CEO of AGL, and unfortunately, we always leave really good questions till after we stop recording, and so we asked him what he had in the way of EVs and solar panels and home batteries and things like that, and which retailer he was going with, whether he'd been shopping around. But no, he assures us he's still with AGL, and still wrestling with the electrification thing, which I guess millions of other people are as well. David, I thought that was a pretty interesting interview. I thought Damien was pretty open. Not too sure satisfied with all his responses, but they were genuine and well said, I suppose.
Well, it's challenging. It is challenging, as we discussed. There's they've got this big coal generators, biggest carbon emitter in Australia, and but it provides a lot of cash flow, and transforming those cash flows into something else is a piece of skill that would challenge a lot of executives, I think, and will certainly challenge AGL and their board. But I suppose in terms of the news, the things that he mentioned, in terms of the next another 900 megawatts of batteries expected to get to completion between 12 and 18 months. And my ears did prick up with the sort of watch this space in terms of a wind PPA. So, as you know, Giles, I'm on about the fact that I think I particularly want to pick on Origin Energy, which has a defined closure date for Eraring and has done bugger all to replace the energy from that, and really, I think, to an extent, let the market down. I'm just going to go through a list of wind farms here, all of which are 700 megawatts or 1,000 megawatts. And they've all either got CIS or they're very close to being fully approved, or they've even got a PPA. And I just want to ask you which ones you think will hit financial close and go ahead in the next 12 months. So let's
I'm an expert then.
Yeah. No, well, this is play a game, and I invite all our listeners to play a game as well and put their answers on a postcard or even an email to editor at Renew Economy. And we'll
that's my email.
And the Energy Insiders will provide a free dinner to the person who gets closest to the pin in picking this list. So, got pens ready. We've got dinner one. Will it get to financial close in 2026?
It'll be one of the next ones to get to financial close, but I don't know whether it'll be 2026.
Pottinger.
Yes, I reckon it probably has to get pretty close. But it's
Liverpool
AGL.
Range.
Liverpool Range. Can it find an off-taker? You tell me, David.
My bet is yes. Valley of the Winds.
Got to get through a court battle first.
So you'll say no?
Depends how long the court battle goes.
Winterbourne.
Know nothing about it.
That's the one in Walker that's been in the EIS process for 5 years so far.
No, it won't, because it hasn't got a network.
Well, I'm not so sure about that. Warrani, that's not going to get there. Bungaban.
That's the one that's contracted to Rio Tinto.
Yes, it is.
Look, well, they've got an off-taker, so there's no reason not to reach financial close. Maybe it's next year or maybe it's the year after, but that's about as good as they can get. They've got approvals and a big corporate off-taker. Why not?
Yes, that's right. And then there's another Squadron Energy one also, whose name just escapes me, in the Arana zone, that also has a CIS award. So all of those.
Angula?
No,
Spices Creek.
Spices Creek, correct. That might also get there, even though they're currently building Ungula. So my point about this, Giles, is that, and I do invite our listeners to put their answers in, which ones they think, which wind farms will get to FID in 2026. And as I said, there's definitely a prize for the one that's closest to the pin, or it'll be a shared price if everyone gets it right. But my point is, we've just went through a list of about 7 or 8 wind farms, each of which, if you average the size of them, it's 1,000 megawatts. None of those are going to get to FID, I don't believe, in this year, but they might. But an awful lot of them will, I think, in 2026, which has them coming online in about 2029.
just in time for the renewable energy target to be met 82%, or to get close to, I suppose.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, another thing, Giles, coming up is we've had a lot of change at the CEC, and that instantly made me think of all the other, the Clean Energy Investor Group. I mean, do they do the same job as the CEC? I don't know. But running around in the background, or not so much in the background, we've had the Smart Energy Council, and no doubt success has many parents, but they'll be particularly proud of the efforts they made in the home battery scheme, and would probably contrast that with anything the CEC's been able to achieve in recent years in terms of a policy initiative. And I noticed they've got a big conference coming up in Brisbane fairly soon, where Murray Watts will be making a speech. Now, who's Murray Watts, you might ask? He should be the electricity minister with a name like that. But he turns out to be the guy in charge of the environment laws, federal
the EPPC
environment.
Act. Yes, he's the Minister for the Environment, and there's only one of them. He's Mr. Watt.
Mr. Who? Mr. Watt.
Mr. Watt. Murray Watt. Yeah. Look, it's going to be interesting. He's supposed to be making a decision about Robbins Island, which is that big contested wind farm off the northwest coast of Tasmania, and that's been sort of delayed God knows how many times. He's already made one decision about salmon farming in Macquarie Harbour, which pissed a lot of people off, including me, because I think that's a bit of an outrage. He is responsible for redesigning the EPPC, the environmental laws, possibly putting together an EPA. So I can't remember which meeting he's talking to. They compete all over the place. But so there's two meetings. There's one from the Smart Energy Council one week, and there's one from the Clean Energy Council a week after.
Well, I don't know if he's speaking at the Clean Energy Council, but I do know he's speaking at the Smart Energy Council one. At least I think I know that. Trouble is, I think I know a lot of things that turn out not to be right, Giles. It's incredible as you get older.
I can't believe that. But no, apparently there's not many people from the LNP state government turning up to speak. So,
what a big surprise that is.
Which is a shame. Look, just about this Clean Energy Council, they've had a really big turnover, as we've seen. I mean, we had Kane Thornton on this podcast a couple of weeks ago. His sort of valet and farewell, but a lot of people have followed him or preceded him out the door. The latest one was Anna Freeman. There's also been Nicholas Abel, Christian Zur, Aaron Wood, Ashley Dalmo, Anita Talberg, Stacey Stinson. I understand there's a couple of others who haven't quite yet announced yet. So we don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's certainly a change of guard, and I guess we'll find out.
More turnover than my over 35 soccer team saw.
Well, I hope they've got that many substitutes, but look, it's going to be interesting. There was a bit of a fear at the Clean Energy Summit in Sydney in July. There's a bit of concern from some of the smaller players. They just sort of think this game is now being played at the big end of town. So men in striped suits and women in striped suits too. But so there was a bit of concern about the change in direction there. So look, we will find out, I guess. One more thing, just getting back to the wind thing, Tag Energy, which I find a really interesting company. They announced this week that they're buying the pipeline, well, they're buying Ace Power, which has been one of the most active pre-development or early development project accumulators in Australia, and quite successful. Tag Energy is interesting because they're building the Golden Plains wind farm in Victoria, which is Australia's biggest. They are led by Frank Wattier.
And actually, stage one's commissioning is going really, really well. Far better than the McIntyre wind farm commissioning. As far as I can see, stage one's almost getting up to capacity from time to time now.
Well, that's right. Yes. Well, it's just about to get to a new hold point of about 650 megawatts. Or is it 700 megawatts? It's up to the next hold point now. They finished the concrete foundations for the second stage and erecting some of those turbines, so they'll be up and running. But what's interesting about them is that they are led by the former head of Neoen Australia. They're actually backed by the same people who backed Neoen. They've got a whole pipeline of large-scale wind and battery projects, and a lot of these are sort of gigawatt-scale projects as well. And it's interesting that they pointed to the same issue: lack of engagement with retailers, not really coming to the party. And they're probably not going to make an FID on any of their wind projects until 2027. Although I should note that they've been pretty bold in the past. Golden Plains, if you remember, David, was actually arrived FID for its first stage without any contracts, totally merchant. So,
look, Giles, it's been perfectly obvious to me for ages that if you build the wind, you will eventually get the contract. The problem, there's a number of problems when you look into it, but the main one is that there's a the market's not clearing around price. The price that the wind developers need is more than what the retailers want to pay at the moment. But the
That's
simple fact
exactly what they
remains,
said.
if you build the bloody wind farms, someone's going to buy the output because you will force the coal generators out, and the wind will be absolutely needed. And it's really as simple as that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That'll do us this week. I mean, what more could you want from an Energy Insiders podcast than a bit of repartee and Damien Nicks if you want some real info.
Thanks very much for Damien Nicks from AGL for coming on. Thanks to you, David. Thanks to all our listeners. I was at the Battery Asset Management Summit. It's called a summit, which is a grand name for a conference in Sydney. A lot of people came up and said how much they enjoyed their podcast and listening to you, David, and your insights. So there you go. So passing on their compliments. And thanks, of course, to our sponsors, Pylon and Evergen. And we'll be back with another episode of the Energy Insiders podcast around about the same time next week. So bye for now.